Good morning, dear friends. My name is Igor Yakovenko. It is now 7 hours 41 minutes in Kiev. It's April 13th, and we continue our weekly reflections about what is happening in Russia, in Ukraine, in the world, and in our souls. Well, this past holiday weekend was absolutely nothing but a series of major triumphs for Donald Trump. Well, perhaps I will begin by discussing the battle for Hungary. Here, Hungary and Europe, well, I would say, decisively and with a remarkably clean sweep, successfully managed to defeat both Trump and Putin. Well, if we look closely at the actual facts of the situation, speaking plainly without any metaphors, the opposition party TISA is clearly winning the race right now. Well, it is already clear that they have won the elections in Hungary. Orban officially conceded his defeat and offered his sincere congratulations to his political opponent Madar on the victory. At this point, apparently, the official numbers are already beginning to shift quite significantly, but the last thing I saw was that more than 90% of all the total ballots had been counted. The main opposition party, known as TISA, can certainly expect to get 138 seats out of 199. Orban's party gets 54, while the far right, Our Homeland, receives 7 mandates. But all of this no longer matters, because if things stay exactly this way, and most likely they will, or TISA will get even more, then the TISA party will have a full constitutional majority. That is, it's more than 2/3. Based on my current understanding, that accounts for 69% of the seats in parliament. So this is a staggering and crushing defeat, and truly an absolutely massive and historic victory. This is not only a victory for Hungary, it's a significantly more profound and far-reaching triumph. And just to give you a better idea of the electric atmosphere in Hungary right now, please take a look at the incredible scene in Budapest last night down in the metro. They're celebrating Viktor Orban's defeat, and young people are chanting, "Russians, go home." This is a slogan used in Hungary during the historic 1956 uprising that was crushed by Soviet troops. Now, let's take a much closer look at the complex situation unfolding in Hungary today. These are exquisite Russian vases, truly beautiful Russian vases. Walking through the Russian bazaar, one can sense the tension in the air. I believe it is perfectly clear to everyone, even without a direct translation, exactly what the message behind this blunt slogan, "Russians go home," truly means for the people here. This sentiment, it is perfectly clear exactly what that intense disagreement was actually all about. Orban has placed his entire bet on Ukraine as a scarecrow and Europe as another scarecrow. We have already discussed this topic extensively, and I have repeatedly shown in our various broadcasts exactly what kind of slogans all the stands were covered with. These were Orban's specific pre-election ones. It is Zelensky portrayed as a terrifying scarecrow and Ursula von der Leyen as a scarecrow as well. They represent the looming threat of a total conquest. The threat of war from Ukraine. Broadly speaking, this is nothing short of absolute madness. Hungary has clearly demonstrated to the world that it is a true European country. I have to say, as I already mentioned before, that Viktor Orban personally extended his congratulations to Magyar on the victory. He said that the results of the elections are clear. He called them painful. He added that Fidesz will serve Hungary while in opposition. In conclusion, Hungary has turned out to be a much more deeply rooted European nation than it initially appeared back when Prime Minister Viktor Orban and Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó were the primary public faces representing the country on the international stage. It really must be openly acknowledged that Orban himself, personally, that defeat actually did him a lot of good, because after losing, he suddenly and unexpectedly began to look and act much more human. I can't help but feel pleased. It's a professional joy of mine for Hungarian sociologists who also proved to be up to the task and predicted roughly this ratio. Well, the latest sociological data suggested the ratio would be 60 to 40, and that's about how it turned out. Here, it turned out to be even more so. Apparently, the very high turnout played a significant role. About 80%, an unprecedented turnout for Hungary. I don't know what Mother, I don't know what TISA is. Right here. Well then, in general, Hungary is one of the most difficult countries for me to fully comprehend and understand, one of the most difficult countries in Central and Eastern Europe for a wide variety of complex reasons, including the fact that I simply don't have a reliable and well-informed interlocutor on Hungary. That's it. I don't know if the long-standing Ukrainian issue in the European Union has finally been unblocked, specifically those 90 billion euros. But there is now hope, there is now a possibility. The reality of the situation is the primary challenge here was also interpersonal relationships. And in this case, there could be many different types of strategic moves coming from all sorts of sides. I have no doubt that right now, both the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and Ukrainian diplomacy are working diligently on how to take full advantage of this situation. This successful removal of that massive and long-standing obstacle on the path to normal relations with Hungary was essential for Orban in order to effectively transform the current political situation. But it is perfectly obvious and clear that what will happen with 100% certainty is a complete and total reset with the European Union. And some impulses, some statements from the European Union, in particular specifically regarding the process of unblocking. These 90 billion euros, they will undoubtedly demand a significant and calculated response. That is to say, if Orban had decided to completely turn his back on the European Union and some of the EU's urgent appeals regarding Ukraine did not affect him, then Hungary will be forced to listen to them very carefully, 100%. And this situation, and this is guaranteed, well, perhaps that is a reset with the European Union will definitely happen 100%. Right now, in just a few seconds, I will provide a direct quote from the speech of the new prime minister, obviously already the new prime minister, and here everything finally falls into place. Well, of course, the main thing, if we look at it as a whole, this significant historical event, this battle for Hungary, of course, reaches out far, far beyond being merely a local Hungarian event. This is, of course, a grand defeat for Trump and Putin. This is, I would say, in many ways, a global defeat for the axis of evil, which now, in the context of the first global schizophrenic war, with each passing day, it truly seems to me, upon reflection, that this specific phrase, the first global schizophrenic war, is proving itself to be remarkably accurate. Because now this axis of evil looks very bizarre and in fact creates a profound separation between certain political leaders and the very countries they are supposed to lead. This so-called axis of evil is currently comprised of Putin, Trump, Netanyahu, and Orban. Moving on. Some, mainly the far right in Europe and beyond, are also involved, though more sporadically. At this time, I would like to share some important words from the recent speech of the newly elected Prime Minister. We have successfully achieved our goal. TISA and the people of Hungary won this important election, not just by a small margin, but by a very large margin. Together, we overthrew Viktor Orban's system, freed Hungary, and reclaimed our homeland. Today, dear friends, you have worked a miracle. Today, Hungary made history. Moreover, it is important to consider the fact that even the provinces have clearly rejected these lies. Hungary truly wants to become a respected European country once again, instead of being treated as a mere vassal state. Remarkably, all of these events took place during a rally organized by the supporters of the victorious party. And then there were shouts in the crowd, "Russians go home." Well, that is actually what we just heard in the Budapest metro system. Next, Hungary. This is again Mada's text. Hungary will once again become a strong, loyal member of the European Union and NATO. Hungary's place is in Europe. We will restore foreign relations, resolve contentious issues with our neighbors. My first foreign visit will be to Poland, the second to Vienna, the third to Brussels, in order to reclaim the European funds owed to Hungary. In other words, this person will fight for their return, these very European subsidies. It's clear that there is something to discuss, and regarding the 90 billion euros for Ukraine. And further, there are also important words. So, I call on the President of the Republic of Hungary to immediately entrust me with the formation of the government and then to step down from his position with dignity if he still has any left. Those who were both the pillars and the puppets of Orban's system must leave public life. We will restore the system of checks and balances. Hungary will not be a country that lets all this go without consequences. Attention, important words. Those who robbed the country must be held accountable. The crowd is chanting, "To prison!" Yes, well, that is certainly true in general. So, what exactly is going to happen next? I mean, a formal address to the Fidesz party about what he. I asked the supporters of TISA to reach out to their fellow countrymen to begin the work of reconciliation, except for those who are guilty. They must be held accountable. Well, that is, I don't know. I had conversations with experts. They assured me that it won't affect Orban. Prosecution for regarding those many crimes he committed while serving as prime minister, well, it is difficult to say for certain. In general, to put it simply, we are about to learn a lot more about what is going to happen now. We are watching with interest what will happen now in Hungary. The overall chances that Ukraine will now finally receive these substantial and much needed funds, which amount to approximately 90 billion euros in total, are currently looking very high indeed. This is primarily because, for the newly appointed Prime Minister, he will remain open to dialogue in any case. There are absolutely no deep-seated interpersonal conflicts to be found here, and furthermore, there is certainly no underlying intention to wage war with Ukraine. And he will undoubtedly be open to influence from the European Union. I think this will happen. The probability of this is very high, although what kind of policy this will eventually be, or what kind of course it takes, is hard to say. This was a person who was in Orban's party, was a strong supporter of Orban. We know this very well. But in reality, let's see, there is still some hope. It's quite clear that this process might not unfold quickly. It will likely take approximately 1 full month or so to form the cabinet and elect the necessary officials, but in general, to put it quite simply, there are serious hopes for a significant change. Overall, a tectonic shift has occurred. In any situation, it is very important that there has been a change of power. And in fact, what has undeniably transpired is that Europe has lost a Trojan horse within NATO and within the European Union. Furthermore, Putin has lost a steadfast and dependable ally who was openly working for him. This is, without a doubt, exceptionally good news. It is perhaps the most significant good news of the entire day. Or it could potentially be the best of the month. No, so in fact, this is really fantastic. Well, now let's move to a much more problematic place. The Middle East, Iran. Here we have another significant and grand victory for Trump, which is quite similar to what we saw in Hungary, except that in Hungary, the victory of Orban, in quotes, or rather his grand defeat with a plus sign, is something to be happy about, so you can truly celebrate and rejoice at his defeat. Right now in the Middle East, Orban has just experienced a devastating and crushing defeat, at least for the time being, as of today. It's incredibly difficult to feel happy about this. In fact, it's completely and utterly impossible, because this defeat means success. for the side that is clearly even worse than Trump, if that's even possible, namely the regime in Iran. So, in the battle with Iran, Trump is currently losing. That is, what happened on Saturday and early Sunday was the failure of the negotiations in Islamabad. You know, when I saw the composition of the negotiating team from the United States, well, it was already clear that they wouldn't reach any agreement with Iran since their positions are diametrically opposed. But when I saw the lineup, it became painfully clear that the defeat would be absolutely catastrophic, because when they were coming down from Trump's plane, Vance, along with his companions, a couple of guys named VTech and ZTech, well, it became obvious that there was no chance of success here. There wasn't any chance to begin with, but at that point, everything became clear. These people, VTech and ZTech, only care about financial gain and are interested in nothing but profit. And on the other side, on the Iranian side, there wasn't the usual kind of interlocutor who was ready to talk about all sorts of different business deals. There was no one like Kirill Dmitriev on the Iranian side. That is precisely why the negotiations between the United States and Iran in Aslanabad ended in a complete, utter, and catastrophic failure. On the most critically important issue, nuclear weapons, the American negotiators, as many had expected, were met with an entirely firm and categorical refusal. Absolutely nothing else in the world mattered anymore, so Vance concluded his affairs very quickly. And he went home. It is perfectly clear that if Iran continues to maintain the sovereign right and the technical ability to create an atomic bomb in the foreseeable future, and it certainly does have this ability, since it already possesses significant stockpiles of enriched uranium, then Putin will, of course, move to help Iran. Consequently, there was absolutely nothing left to talk about. In other words, there is absolutely no requirement for further diplomatic negotiations here at all. In addition to this, Iran has also continued its aggressive blockade of the strategic Hormuz Strait. But then there's another big surprise, Trump. But we'll have more on that shortly, in a few seconds. So let's sum up the interim results. So where exactly did the Americans and Iran leave things? The primary goals were about the nuclear development program, and that situation is still ongoing today. The result is zero. So the goal was regime change. The regime, well, there are some new people, but the regime itself has definitely survived. And if we talk about personnel changes, most likely they've been for the worse. The missile program remains, and there are still missiles. Both the citizens of Israel and the people living in various cities along the Persian Gulf are feeling the significant impact of these ongoing tensions. Consequently, the strategic support for regional proxies has remained a consistent and central part of the overall geopolitical landscape. When we look at the situation regarding the Yemeni Houthis and Hamas, every single one of these factors remains unchanged. So here too, the final result is zero. And finally, the result is not just zero, but it has become deeply negative. That is to say, before this war began, Iran did not control the Strait of Hormuz, but now it certainly does, thereby effectively gripping by the throat not just the countries of the Middle East, but the entirety of humanity across the globe. So, as always, by trying to interfere and taking someone's side, Iran inevitably results in a sharp deterioration of the situation. And of course, there is an extraordinary and deeply shocking development that goes beyond even the usual stories related to Trump. This is that in the battle for the Strait of Hormuz, Trump has openly aligned himself directly with the enemy side. So he promised to unblock it, but that did not yield the results he had originally anticipated, and now he has decided to block it instead. To put it in another way, he has officially declared that, so He officially announced his blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and stated that they would not allow any vessels to pass through the strait. No ships at all will be permitted, not even those collecting cargo. That is to say, Iran is currently planning to charge a fee for all passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump said no. According to many seasoned political observers, Donald Trump is apparently aiming to take part in the lucrative process of collecting tribute from those vessels passing through. In other words, at the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz, Trump also intends to act as a kind of opportunistic highwayman, as he clearly does not trust Iran to be left alone with such a powerful role. Well, I certainly don't think the leadership in Iran will ever agree to such a lopsided partnership. But in any case, as of today, Trump is declaring a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. It would be absolutely impossible to come up with a more preposterous and utterly nonsensical course of action, because this means that Trump is, in effect, actively providing strategic support to the Iranian regime with his own two hands. Of course, Iran wouldn't mind collecting money from passing tankers, but the very fact that the United States is helping Iran to block the Strait of Hormuz and thereby completely suffocate and strangle the entire global economy, well, I don't know. It is truly beyond my wildest imagination if the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps ever even dreamed of anything quite like this. Do the top-ranking commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps dream of something like this? But I think that even in their most daring and ambitious dreams, they never actually imagined that an entire president of the United States of America would take their side and become a participant in the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Well, here is my assertion. This is the first. The global schizophrenic war is receiving more and more confirmation with each passing day. And so, what else is there to discuss today? Well, we certainly started our program with some very good news, as the battle for Hungary was won by the forces of good. But there is also another truly wonderful piece of good news to share with you all. Just yesterday, Mikhail Valentinovich Sava reported that there was a truly remarkable and heroic operation to rescue two very charming and innocent little creatures. And now I have some lovely photos of them right here in front of me. So let's take a moment to look at them together on the screen. This is the wonderful story of the successful rescue of two remarkable animals, a very lucky dog and a sweet, beautiful cat. We're talking about this charming little face right here. Take a very close look at the cat's expression. It is quite easy to see this is a battle-hardened frontline tomcat, who, if necessary, could take down no less than a single occupier. That's what his face looks like. So here's what this is about. We're talking about, this was yesterday, Mikhail Valentinovich. Let's take a look at one more photo. Here they are once again, but this time they are pictured with the brave people who rescued them. So we are really talking about those individuals and about the specific event that Mikhail Valentinovich mentioned in our discussion yesterday. These are the soldiers of the 14th Separate Mechanized Brigade, named after Prince Roman the Great, who were evacuated from the Kataya Sobaka position with the help of a drone. This drone was on a regular supply run, usually delivering food to the front lines. But this time it was already on the long way back. The drone took off high into the sky, carrying these two wonderful characters, a small cat and a very loyal dog. The cat remained faithfully by its side after its owner was seriously injured and rushed to the hospital for treatment. Consequently, they were safely transported to a new location together with the dog. So, these animals stayed together. These remarkable creatures traveled 12 long kilometers through the air, and they have finally reached a place where they are safe and sound with their companion. So, this is such a wonderful and significant event. It shows that there really are heartwarming and positive things taking place in our world. I've been criticized for always sharing only dark news, but that's not true. When there's something to be happy about, there really is. We are truly delighted and very happy to give everyone the wonderful chance for us all to rejoice and celebrate together as we gather here today. It is Sunday, or rather, today is actually a Monday. And that means at 8 o'clock p.m., we will have a conversation with Sergei Maratovich Grabsky. I think there will be plenty to talk about. That's pretty much why I haven't said anything about the events at the front today. Well, if I am being completely honest with you, there isn't really that much to talk about. It's quite challenging to discuss the events at the front in great detail because the front line is remaining largely stable and holding steady for the time being. But still, the military, what's happening? War is the front. So today we'll be discussing these specific developments in more detail.